Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for Empowered for Balance. And today we're going to talk about racism, right? There's a lot about it going on in the news these days, and I am concerned about it. I'm sure you may also be. And so I have an expert in that coming in today to share with us what it is, the little types of racism, and even how we can even take care of ourselves if we feel we are faced or we are experiencing some form of racism. So before we go on, have you subscribed yet? If you've not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button, because that's how you're going to get notifications every week when we upload new episodes. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Nicole Carlton. Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Good, good. How are you, Alma?
I am great, and it's a great opportunity to talk to you today because I know you're very passionate about this topic. But before we go on, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yes, my name is Nicole Kelton Sublette, and I am the owner of Nicole Sublette Counseling, which is a private practice based in Concord, New Hampshire. I'm a licensed clinical mental health clinician. I'm also a hypnotherapist and master energy practitioner. So I combine psychotherapy with holistic health. I'm also work in arenas of social justice and advocacy, and I do public speaking and educating work around racism.
Awesome. You do a lot. You're a woman of many hats. But let's talk a little bit about racism and what got you into this, because I know that you have your own story. So if you want to share a little bit about that.
Certainly. So how I got into racism, well, one being a woman of color, and so therefore having some marginalized identities. But in my clinical practice and work, what has happened is really with the incidences on the media that's coming to light and awareness. Well, this has been happening for a very long time, but it's really been in the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And so as a psychotherapist, this has really been coming up in my clinical work, where people are coming in with these symptoms that looked a lot like PTSD, which I can talk about in a little bit. And yet also it was a little bit different than PTSD. And so that's what really got me started on the work, especially the advocacy piece, because more and more people were coming in, especially my clients of color, that were very symptomatic.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about racism. And, you know, when we hear racism, a lot of us just think about the direct attacks, right? It's like somebody calling somebody the N-word, or somebody telling somebody their skin color is something else, that, you know. But I know that there's a subtle form of racism, and that's what I'm really interested in, which is a microaggression. So if you want to explain a little bit what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are subtle forms of racism or racist acts, and we are terming them microaggressions. And also we're actually looking to move away from that term to actually, as you said, subtle acts of exclusion, because the impact on the person when they are received or when they are targeted, they are not so what we call micro. And so what things can look like, one, violation of personal space. For example, asking someone if they can touch your hair, which is one, a violation of personal space. It also historically goes back to the times of slavery, where people of color, Black people, were treated like oddities and curiosities, or comments like, wow, you're really articulate for a Black person, or your credit to your race. And so why that would be an aggression is because it's acting as if one is surprised that someone from a different race could actually be articulate or could actually be intelligent. And so cumulatively, those have impacts upon the people who are being targeted by these. And it's not also just based on race. People who are identified as LGBTQIA are often targets, people with disabilities, the elderly, and children. So the people who have less privilege and less power can all be targeted by these microaggressions and acts of exclusion.
Yeah. So these microaggressions and acts of exclusions, do you think that we can also get affected, even if we are not directly experiencing it, but we are watching it, on TV or in the media.
Yes, absolutely. So exposure indirectly or directly can cause one to become symptomatic. And oftentimes too, what happens, we have different types of oppression. And so what happens is there's ideologies. And so that's the first type of oppression and racism, is this ideological, that a certain group of people are better than others. And so what happens is that people from marginalized groups, people of color, LGBTQIA, disabled, internalize that as something is wrong with them. So the ideology, or people who are making or saying these things, don't have to do any work anymore because people have internalized it, like something's wrong with me. And so that is internalized oppression. And that can look like increased sensitivity to things, reactivity, inability to relax, feeling constantly anxious, feelings of being depressed. And when a person's feeling anxious or depressed, they have a tendency to think, oh man, it's me, something's going on with me, when oftentimes it's actually something bigger than them, and it's the systems in which they live or societal things that are going on, and they're actually having both a mental and a physiological response to.
Yeah. And how about, I hear a lot of the term systematic oppression. What is it? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so systemic oppression is that when there are policies and laws in place that impact the rights of marginalized peoples. So for example, there's one currently that's going around that is stating that using the terms race, or having diversity, equity, and inclusion work is divisive work. And so they're actually trying to eliminate, to have conversations. So, which really takes us away from actually having multicultural competency or equity in the job place. And so there are policies out there that really can hurt some people. Other forms or systems, people of color are less likely sometimes to be able to get mortgages or finances, and have also lack of access to getting good education, and poverty and socioeconomic status is all interrelated, and it all filters down from the system to the individual.
Yeah. So, the women who listen to, and the people who listen to this podcast usually do, because we talk a lot about burnout, stress, and overwhelm. And so we want to tie this topic into that. How does all these different acts of, discrimination and racism and whatever it is affect our wellness and our stress levels as people?
And they do. So they do impact our stress levels and our wellness. And so some things it's really good to look at, to also know if you are experiencing what might be called race-based traumatic stress, which is very much like PTSD.
Okay.
And so what happens is that one might feel hypervigilant, meaning always looking over their shoulder, just scanning around, seeing if this is safe. Increased sensitivity to threats. So that can look like avoiding new situations, heightened sensitivity to being disrespected and shamed, increased psychological and physiological symptoms, which means chronic stress. Decreased immune functioning, anxiety, depression, limbic system dominance. What that means is that instead of our reptilian center, which is our survival center in our brain, our amygdala is always on, and it's always scanning the environment for survival. So it's not in a relaxed state. It's like, is this safe? Is this safe? And then it's that fight. When there's danger, fight or freeze. And so it's always that fight, flight, or freeze reaction. increased alcohol and drug misuse, increased aggression, and also a narrowing sense of time. People living in a chronic state of stress and danger, they actually don't develop a sense of future.
That is very interesting. Also, because, the last thing you said about not being able to develop a sense of future, then that means that this doesn't allow people to even dream, right? Think about where they want to go. Wow. That's serious.
It's very serious. And so, in its own self, it's almost like an epidemic. And everyone, though, when we're living in these systems, and it's not just marginalized communities, it's everyone, we're all being traumatized, right? And we're a whole, we're a collective. So if one part of us is not healthy, it can impact the whole system. Just like if one part of the body is not healthy, your whole body system can be out of whack. And it's the same with communities and societies.
Yeah. How about self-esteem and self-confidence? How does this also affect that?
So when one receives the message that repeatedly that they're not worthy, not good enough, and somehow inferior, it's very difficult to identify a strong sense of self. Sometimes a result of that is an over-reliance on others or external validation. Some people might go into relationships seeking their partner to constantly validate them because they're constantly seeking and looking for that outside sources to affirm them, because it's called weathering, that repeated exposure to these events. So that weathering really takes someone from having that high sense of esteem and that grounded connectedness to self.
Wow. So now we've spoken a little bit about what it is, how it affects our stress levels and our self-esteem and self-confidence. Now let's talk about how we can cope. Any woman out there who may find herself going through some form of discrimination or some form of racial aggression or microaggression, how can she cope? How can she handle it?
So one thing to do is to connect with community, trusted social supports, family, activists, therapists, and community leaders, and find support with those who affirm your identity and those with whom you feel comfortable with, and share and express feelings. And then also, when it comes to connecting with others, is also set boundaries around labor-intensive communication. Often people of color tend to be the go-to people to talk about race. And what can happen though is if we're constantly talking about race and we're constantly sharing our stories, we're actually always constantly being traumatized. So if people are asking you questions, what it might be like to be a Black woman, or what your experience is, or have you ever experienced racism, and all these things, is that sometimes it's really good to set the boundary and say, this is, this can be very traumatizing to me. I don't really feel like reliving that today. And this is a really labor intensive conversation.
Yeah, it's amazing you said that, because I get that a lot. I get that a lot, and it's always like, how does it feel like, I do, and I'm always talking about it. So yeah, it's like reliving it, right? Over and over again.
It is. And so, another way to cope with that is that, people can also do their own research, and they can also find their own ways to get involved in advocacy. There's tons of books out there, varying books out there. And so it's just doing research and telling people, you can really look into this on your own. So setting that boundary with others. And also what's important is setting boundaries for ourselves, which means taking media breaks, be careful of the content that one is viewing, because that can also be triggering. And so it's making sure that your electronic space is also a safe enough space so you're not constantly being vicariously traumatized. And I know there's been a lot going on with the Chauvin trial and the teenage girl that was just shot. By a cop. So there's so much in Dante, right? And it's just, the list goes on. So it's really sometimes making social media also that safe
Mm.
space. I'm very intentional
Yeah.
about who I have on my social media, who I connect with, and they tend to be about, peace and loving and holistic modalities. And I really try to create my electronic environment to be a safe, peaceful
Yeah.
environment for me.
Yeah. 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 How does self-care come in here?
So self-care is really critically the most important thing one can do. And there's a lot of demand. We are working women, I know you have children, I have children. There's so much going on, and
Yeah.
it's really trying to build a schedule, though, as much as possible around self-care,
Mm.
despite the demand. And, so for one thing I do is I wake up in the morning before my children. So that means it's very early. It's still dark out. And I
Yeah.
use that time to meditate, be self-reflective, journal,
Yeah.
and express gratitude, because I know that's my
Mm.
time. And once those kids are up, especially
Yeah.
little one, he's going to be terrorizing the house as soon as he wakes up.
Yeah.
I need to take
Yeah.
moments for myself, and then around my lunch break sometimes if I'm able to, and then also in the evening, once the kids are in bed, also just doing more self-care.
Yeah. 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 That's very important. One thing just to add to everything you've spoken about, one thing for me, when my clients show up and they're going through that, I tell them, how about we focus on what you can control? Because sometimes we think we can save the world, and we're so much into advocacy. Yes, advocate, but you should make sure you're advocating and taking care of yourself first, right? Before you go out there to try to be the martyr for everybody.
Absolutely. And it
Yeah.
starts with self. And I love that you do that with clients, because it is self 100%. And I also share that with my clients as well. We are the microcosm that impacts the macrocosm. So when we are like a bonfire, like, because we're like taking care of ourselves, we can really share our light with everyone else. We can
Yeah.
do all the work with everyone else because we've taken care of ourselves first. But when we're depleted and we just have like a little spark of light, like we can't hand that out, because if we do, then we're left
Yeah.
empty and
Yeah.
depleted. So it's so important.
Yeah, yeah, the empty bottle. Yep, yep,
Yes.
that's true. Wow. This has been a great conversation, Nicole. Where can we find you if anybody wants to, reach out to you?
Absolutely. So you can find me at www.NicoleSublette.counseling. I have a Facebook page, Nicole Sublette Counseling. Starting on Instagram. I'm not super social media savvy yet. It's coming. It's coming. And I'm also located in Concord, New Hampshire too, and on Psychology Today. You can just look up
Yeah.
Nicole Sublette.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm going to put all those links in the show notes. So if anybody wants to reach out to you, they could. But, what are your last words for that woman out there who, there's a lot that's been going on, especially in the United States with all these killings. And, it's like for the past 1 year, it's just been going, going, going. I know we've had some positive news, but again, with a trial, but, a lot of women are probably still traumatized. So for that woman out there who feels very devastated, and in addition to that comes the pandemic, right? So with all that going on, what are your last words for that woman?
So my last words are, one, if you find yourself having any of the symptoms that I mentioned, is seeking help, whether
Yeah.
that's from a therapist, community, or church. So surround yourself with loving people,
Mm-hmm.
nourish yourself with good foods, because we got to take care of ourselves. So eating well, exercising, sleeping when we can are
Yeah.
all things. Time in
Yeah.
nature, and most importantly is laughter and joy. So finding time
Yeah.
to make yourself really just laugh and just marvel at the moments of joy that we can have.
Yeah. 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 I love that. On that note, I want to say thank you so much for taking time off your really busy schedule to be with me today.
Yes, well, you're very welcome. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today.
Yes, yes. And thank you so much for sticking with us till the end. My biggest take home from what Nicole said is we need to set our boundaries. We need to know how much of that social media or that, the news that we can take in. We need to protect ourselves and guard what we are taking in, and then also we need to focus on taking care of ourselves, our self-care, and eating good food, drinking good water, enough water, exercising, having some fun, because those are all the little things that we can do in the midst of all the chaos that's going on out there to take care of ourselves. And like Nicole said, when your light is shining and your fire is burning, then you can give it out to everybody else. So we need to take care of ourselves first, right? If you haven't subscribed yet, please, again, hit the subscribe button so that every week when we have new videos, you can know it, and then you can, you don't miss out on anything. And before I go, I just want to extend a quick invitation to you. If you're a woman out there and you're stressed out and with all this going on, you don't know what you feel like you're not really yourself, you're experiencing some of these symptoms and you don't even know where to start from, please book a free call with me by going to www.empoweredforbalance.com/free session. And in that session, we could talk about what's going on with you, what your challenges are. And hey, even if I cannot help you, I can point you to the direction of where you can go to get the help that you need. Again, don't forget, go to www.empoweredforbalance.com/free session. Take care of yourself, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.